America once thrived on jobs that defined entire generations. The milkman making morning rounds, the switchboard operator connecting voices across cities, and the fuller brush salesman knocking door to door. Each role carried a sense of pride, purpose, and community that feels almost foreign today. These weren't just occupations. They were reflections of a simpler, more hands-on way of life before automation, apps, and algorithms took over. In this video, we're looking back at some of those forgotten professions, the silent heroes that kept America running, built its neighborhoods, and slowly disappeared as the world began to move faster. Before alarm clocks became a household essential, waking up on time wasn't something you did. It was something you paid someone to do. These people were called knocker-uppers, human alarm clocks who made their living rousing factory workers, miners, and clerks long before sunrise. Armed with long poles, batons, or even pea shooters, they'd patrol dim, chilly streets, tapping on windows or pipes until their clients stirred. In industrial towns across Britain and America during the late 1800s and early 1900s, they were as dependable as the morning whistle. A few pennies a week secured punctuality, a bargain compared to the unreliable mechanical alarm clocks of the era. Some knocker-uppers took great pride in their craft, memorizing dozens of clients' schedules and working with remarkable precision. Larger neighborhoods even had teams or family-run operations to cover more ground before the workday began. Though the idea may sound quaint or humorous now, it was an effective system that kept factories running on time for decades. But as affordable alarm clocks and electricity spread, the profession slowly disappeared. By the 1940s, only a few remained. The knocker-uppers story is a reminder of how every convenience we take for granted today, even something as simple as waking up, once relied on another person's commitment, punctuality, and the gentle tap of a stick against glass. Here's a job that sounds straight out of a horror movie: leech collector. And yes, it was completely real. Back in the 19th and early 20th centuries, when doctors believed bloodletting could cure nearly anything from fevers to headaches, leeches were in massive demand. Someone had to gather them, and that someone was often a poor laborer, usually a woman, trudging through swamps, marshes, and ponds, letting the slimy creatures latch onto their bare legs so they could be peeled off and sold. It was as disgusting as it sounds. Hours spent waist-deep in muddy water, pulling dozens of squirming leeches into jars, and then schlepping them to apothecaries or medical supply shops. Advertisements in local papers often called for fresh leech stock, showing just how normal the job had become. But the work was far from safe. Collectors risked infections, blood loss, and diseases from swampy environments. It required resilience, tolerance for pain, and a strong stomach. For many, it was one of the few ways to earn steady pay without formal education or training. As modern medicine advanced and bloodletting fell out of favor, the need for leech collectors vanished. Yet, the creatures themselves weren't entirely forgotten. Leeches later found a niche in modern surgical practices, helping with blood circulation in delicate procedures. Thankfully, doctors now source them from controlled labs instead of sending someone into a swamp with nothing but mud and leeches for company. It's a shocking reminder of how strange, messy, and sometimes dangerous work could be, all in the name of medicine. If you think modern pest control is gross, wait until you hear about the rat catchers of early America. These were the brave, or maybe just desperate, individuals hired by cities, factories, and even the military to hunt down and kill rats by hand, long before traps and chemicals were common. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, rats weren't just a nuisance. They were a serious public health threat. They spread diseases like typhus and plague, chewed through food supplies, and overran warehouses and homes in cities from New York to Chicago. Rat catchers would crawl through sewers, dark alleys, and docks, armed with traps, dogs, or even ferrets to flush out the rodents. It was filthy work, and a single bite could lead to infection or worse. Some rat catchers even became minor local celebrities. Cities would offer bounties for each tail collected, and the most skilled could earn a surprisingly decent living. Others found creative side hustles, selling live rats to laboratories for research or to sportsmen for training hunting dogs. By the 1950s, chemical pesticides and organized pest control companies made the job mostly obsolete. Yet in its day, The Ratcatcher was a strange blend of hero, hustler, and health worker. They remind us that even the dirtiest, most dangerous jobs once had a crucial role in keeping society functioning. Today, it sounds bizarre, but back then, rat catchers were essential. Before electricity illuminated city streets, one person had the nightly task of bringing the darkness to life. This person was the lamplighter. From the late 1800s to the early 1900s, these workers roamed towns at dusk, carrying long poles with small flames at the tip, igniting each gas lamp one by one. At dawn, they'd retrace their steps to extinguish them, ensuring the rhythm of light and shadow continued without fail. The work may sound romantic. A lone figure walking cobblestone streets as warm light bloomed behind him, but it was demanding and dangerous. Lamplighters climbed ladders in rain, snow, and wind, faced the constant threat of gas leaks or flare-ups, and covered miles each night. In busy cities, a single lamplighter might tend hundreds of lamps, working with steady precision to keep neighborhoods safe and lit. Despite its challenges, the job carried a quiet dignity. Lamplighters became trusted figures in their communities, symbols of reliability in a world that depended on their punctuality and care. By the 1920s, electric lighting rendered their services obsolete, and the glow of gas lamps faded from most streets. Yet their legacy lingers in old photographs, literature, and the rare historic districts that still hire lamplighters for tradition's sake. They remind us of a time when even light itself wasn't automatic, when it took human hands, patience, and a steady flame to hold back the night. When there were no smartphones, no speed dial, and even no rotary phones, there were switchboard operators, the human lifeline of early communication. From the early 1900s through the mid-20th century, these mostly female workers made every phone call possible by manually connecting callers through vast switchboards filled with plugs, cords, and blinking lights. When someone picked up the receiver, the operator would answer, ask who they wanted to reach, and then swiftly connect the call by inserting cords into the correct jacks. The job demanded focus, agility, and calm under pressure. In busy city exchanges, operators handled hundreds of calls per hour, juggling voices, connections, and timing with near-mechanical precision. Yet beyond the wires and switches, operators provided something deeply human. In small towns, they recognized voices instantly, routed emergency calls before requests were made, and even checked in on elderly residents if something seemed off. They weren't just operators, they were trusted members of the community, part of the invisible social web that held towns together. Automation began phasing out their role in the 1960s, and by the 1980s, the profession had all but vanished. Today, their legacy remains as a reminder of when communication relied on empathy as much as efficiency. For decades, switchboard operators were the unseen voices that kept the world connected, the heartbeat of an era when every call began not with a button, but with a person saying, "Number, please?" Before machines took over the world of number crunching, computers weren't devices, they were people, mostly women. These human computers worked tirelessly in labs, universities, and government offices, solving intricate mathematical problems entirely by hand or with basic tools like slide rules and mechanical calculators. During the early and mid-1900s, their calculations powered progress in astronomy, engineering, and space exploration. NASA, for instance, depended on human computers during the space race, most famously Katherine Johnson, whose precise math helped plot the trajectories that carried astronauts safely to the moon. The job required intense concentration and flawless accuracy. Human computers spent countless hours performing repetitive calculations, double-checking figures, and cross-verifying results with teammates. A single misplaced decimal could derail a project or endanger a mission, yet, despite their essential role, they were often overlooked, their names missing from reports, their achievements hidden behind the fame of scientists and astronauts. The rise of digital computers in the 1950s and 60s changed everything. Machines could compute in seconds what once took teams days, rendering human computers largely obsolete. But their legacy is undeniable. They laid the mathematical foundations for modern computing, data analysis, and space science. The story of the human computer is one of quiet brilliance, proof that before technology transformed the world, it was human patience, precision, and intellect that made the impossible possible. When machines had not taken over railroad construction, the smooth, rhythmic sound of metal striking metal belonged to the Gandy dancers, crews of laborers who kept America's railways straight, safe, and running on time. From the late 1800s through the early 20th century, they were the backbone of the booming rail industry, maintaining the endless miles of track that stitched the country together. The work was exhausting and dangerous. These men, often black or immigrant laborers, spent long days under the sun, lifting heavy rails, replacing wooden ties, and driving spikes by hand. What made them stand out was their rhythm. To coordinate their hammer swings, they sang work songs and chants that turned grueling labor into something almost musical. The steady beat kept everyone in sync, reduced mistakes, and built a sense of unity that turned a crew into a single, moving rhythm. The name Gandy Dancer likely came from the tools made by the Gandy Manufacturing Company, paired with the sight of workers dancing along the rails as they worked. Despite the fatigue and danger, they took immense pride in their craft. A single crooked rail could mean disaster. Such was the level of mastery required. By the 1950s, machines took over the work, and the Gandy dancers faded into history. Yet their legacy remains, not just in the rails they laid, but in the songs that carried them through, a true harmony of muscle, rhythm, and perseverance. Back in the 1940s and 1950s, before fast food chains dominated, every town had its own soda fountain, a social hub where people gathered for ice cream floats, sundaes, and fizzy concoction. At the center of it all was the soda jerk, the young man, and sometimes woman, who jerked the handle of the soda fountain to mix carbonated water with flavored syrup. But they weren't just serving drinks. They were entertainers, part-time therapists, and local celebrities all rolled into one. Soda jerks had a flair for style, crisp white uniforms, slicked back hair, and hands fast enough to whip up a banana split with showmanship worthy of a stage act. Their job required precision, memory, and personality, balancing the perfect root beer float while chatting with customers, remembering regulars' favorites, and keeping the counter spotless and welcoming. They brought energy and laughter to every order, turning a simple soda run into a social ritual. As self-serve soda machines, pre-packaged snacks, and fast food restaurants rose in the 1960s, the soda jerk gradually disappeared. The lively community culture of the soda fountain gave way to convenience, and the role that once defined youthful charm and small-town warmth vanished with it. Yet the soda jerk lives on in pop culture, immortalized in diners, vintage films, and the nostalgia of a time when a cold drink, a smile, and a bit of flair could make anyone's day a little brighter. There was a time when fresh milk didn't come from a grocery shelf, but from a friendly face at your doorstep. The Milkman. Before refrigerators became common household appliances, these early morning delivery men were an essential part of everyday life. Each dawn, they made their rounds in small trucks or horse-drawn carts, dropping off glass bottles of fresh milk that families depended on for breakfast, tea, or baking. Milk spoiled quickly, and without modern cooling, daily delivery wasn't a luxury, it was survival. But the milkman did more than deliver dairy. He was a trusted neighbor, greeting families, sharing small talk, and often slipping in extra cream or butter for special occasions. Payments and requests were left under empty bottles, and by morning, new ones appeared like clockwork. Some milkmen even tracked customers' habits, skipping deliveries when they were away, or adding extras when relatives visited. In many towns, the milkman was the heartbeat of the neighborhood, known by name and greeted with smiles. The rise of home refrigeration in the 1950s and 60s, followed by supermarkets and long-lasting cartons, slowly ended the tradition. By the 1980s, the sound of clinking bottles at sunrise had all but vanished. Still, the image of the milkman lingers as a nostalgic reminder of a time when service was personal, trust was unspoken, and community arrived fresh at your doorstep every morning. Bowling alleys relied on pinsetters, real people, often teenage boys, who manually reset the pins after every roll. It was fast-paced, noisy, and surprisingly dangerous work. These pin boys perched at the back of the lane, jumping down between turns to clear fallen pins and carefully arrange a new set in the classic triangle formation, all while dodging rogue bowling balls flying their way. The job demanded lightning-fast reflexes, precision, and nerves of steel. Misjudge a player's throw and a nasty bruise, or worse, was almost guaranteed. The noise was constant, the air thick with smoke and laughter, and the pressure to keep up with the pace of play never let up. Despite the hazards, it was a popular part-time gig during the 1930s and 40s, especially for teens looking to earn pocket money during the Great Depression. Pinsetters became a familiar presence, contributing to the bustling, blue-collar energy of early bowling alleys. Everything changed in the 1950s with the invention of the automatic pinsetter machine. Bowling lanes became faster, safer, and far more efficient. Human pin setters disappeared almost overnight, replaced by machines that could reset pins flawlessly every time. Today, the idea of someone standing behind a live bowling lane sounds almost absurd, but for decades, pin setters were an essential, gritty part of America's bowling boom. Their quick reflexes, hard work, and resilience remain a fascinating glimpse into a bygone era of hands-on labor. Before the days of automatic buttons and touchscreens, riding an elevator was a small but elegant human experience, thanks to the elevator operator. Dressed in crisp uniforms, often complete with hats and gloves, these attendants didn't just press buttons. They controlled the entire ride, managing speed, aligning floors manually, greeting passengers, and keeping order in crowded city buildings. The job became especially important in the early 1900s, when elevators were still mechanical marvels and required both confidence and finesse to operate. Using a large lever or wheel, the operator would guide the elevator smoothly between floors, carefully stopping at just the right height so passengers wouldn't stumble over a gap. It was a skill that took practice. One wrong move could mean a jolt, a misaligned floor, or even a panicked rider. In luxury hotels, office towers, and department stores, operators added a personal touch to the journey, offering friendly conversation, assisting with shopping bags, and keeping calm during rush hours. As automation advanced, the profession slowly faded. By the 1970s, push-button elevators had become standard, and the need for operators nearly vanished. Some passengers resisted the change at first, uneasy about trusting a machine to move them safely, but convenience and cost efficiency eventually won out. Today, a few historic buildings still employ elevator operators for charm and tradition. Once the gatekeepers of vertical travel, they embodied a mix of precision, professionalism, and quiet grace. A human touch in an increasingly automated world. Before refrigerators made ice an everyday convenience, there were the ice cutters, tough, frostbitten workers who literally carved massive blocks of ice from frozen lakes and rivers during the harshest winter months. In the 1800s and early 1900s, this was an essential trade. Ice wasn't just for cold drinks, it kept food fresh in ice boxes, preserved meat and fish, and even supplied hospitals, breweries, and distant cities. Armed with handsaws, chisels, and long iron tongs, ice cutters set out before dawn, battling freezing winds and dangerously thin ice. They'd mark out a grid, saw through the frozen surface, and haul shimmering blocks, each weighing hundreds of pounds, onto sleds or wagons pulled by horses. The work was wet, freezing, and perilous. Frostbite slips, and even drowning were constant risks, and the bitter cold offered no mercy. Yet despite the danger, ice cutting was a respected seasonal trade, demanding both strength and precision. Once harvested, the ice was packed in sawdust or straw and stored in massive, insulated ice houses to slow melting. From there, deliverymen, often the same men who had cut it, would transport it to towns and cities throughout the year. The entire process was a feat of coordination and endurance, built entirely on human labor and nature's chill. By the mid-20th century, electric refrigeration rendered ice cutters obsolete almost overnight. Still, their legacy remains, a testament to human resilience and ingenuity, capturing the era when winter itself powered the world's cooling needs. When there was no plumbing and sewage systems, someone had to deal with humanity's most unpleasant byproduct, and that someone was the Gong farmer. The title sounds odd, but Gong was actually an old slang term for human waste. These workers were responsible for cleaning out cesspits, outhouses, and public latrines, literally shoveling out the waste that accumulated under cities and towns. Most worked after dark, partly because of the unbearable smell, and partly because no one wanted to see the job being done. equipped with long-handled scoops, spades, and buckets. They climbed down into pits that could be waist-deep in filth. Bit by bit, they filled their buckets, hauling them up and emptying them into carts. The contents, politely called night soil, weren't just thrown away. They were sold as fertilizer to nearby farmers, completing a grim but practical early form of recycling. The dangers were constant. Toxic fumes often caused fainting or suffocation, and some workers never made it out of the pits alive. Even those who survived faced social isolation, since the stench clung to them no matter how much they washed. Yet without them, streets and wells would have overflowed with disease. By the late 1800s, with underground sewers and sanitation systems spreading across cities, the job finally vanished. Still, the Gong farmers deserve a strange sort of respect. They did the necessary job that no one wanted to do and handled the worst of humanity's mess so everyone else could live a little cleaner. It's easy to gag at their job, but civilization quite literally depended on it. In the era before computers and office automation, the heartbeat of every business, newsroom, and government department was the typing pool, a bustling space alive with the rhythmic clatter of typewriter keys. From the 1920s through the 1970s, these rooms symbolized efficiency and order, filled with rows of typists, mostly women, working in perfect unison to keep the paper-based world running. Supervisors paced between desks with stopwatches, tracking words per minute as typists hammered out letters, reports, and memos with precision and focus. The job demanded incredible skill and patience. One typo could mean retyping an entire page, and even minor formatting errors were unacceptable. The constant click-clack of dozens of typewriters became the soundtrack of mid-century office life, a steady rhythm that represented both progress and pressure. Yet despite the monotony, many workers took pride in their speed, accuracy, and professionalism. Beyond the noise and deadlines, typing pools also offered a rare opportunity for women to enter the workforce at a time when career options were limited. They were places of quiet ambition and camaraderie, where friendships formed over shared workloads and whispered conversations. For some, the typing pool was just the beginning, a first step toward positions as secretaries, office managers, or even executives. By the 1980s, the rise of personal computers and word processors ended the age of communal typing rooms. But for decades, typing pools were the unsung powerhouses of American industry, the living machinery that kept communication flowing, one keystroke at a time. In the early decades of the 20th century, one figure became as recognizable in American neighborhoods as the mailman. This was the Fuller brush salesman, carrying large, leather-bound sample cases filled with brushes, brooms, shoe polish, and cleaning supplies. These door-to-door salesmen were pioneers of personal marketing. They didn't just sell products. They sold confidence, charm, and reliability. Every knock on a door was a chance to turn a stranger into a loyal customer, and many did so with nothing more than a friendly smile and a polished pitch. The Fuller Brush Company built its empire on what it proudly called the Fuller Way: polite persistence, personalized service, and a rock-solid satisfaction guarantee. In an era before supermarkets or home delivery, the Fuller Brush Man was the store. His visits were small neighborhood events. Children watched in fascination as he demonstrated clever cleaning gadgets or polished dusty furniture to a shine right before their eyes. But behind the charm was hard, physical work. Salesmen walked miles daily, lugging heavy sample kits in every kind of weather, often facing slammed doors and polite refusals. Yet the most successful among them built careers and communities, earning respect through consistency and trust. By the 1980s, the rise of retail chains and digital convenience ended the door-to-door era. Still, the Fuller brush salesman endures as a symbol of old-fashioned American hustle, a reminder of a time when business wasn't about algorithms, but about handshakes, smiles, and human connection. During the age of cannons and tall sailing ships, one of the most dangerous jobs at sea wasn't for hardened sailors, it was for small boys. Known as powder monkeys, these young assistants, often just 10 to 14 years old, were responsible for carrying gunpowder from the ship's magazine to its cannons during battle. On naval warships and even early mining sites, they were the lifeline of firepower, darting through chaos to keep the guns blazing. It was perilous, nerve-wracking work. The powder magazine was a cramped, dimly lit chamber packed with barrels of black powder, where a single spark could destroy the entire ship. Powder monkeys had to race through smoke-filled decks, dodging cannon fire and flying debris, while clutching small kegs or pouches of powder. Their size made them ideal for the job. They could weave between cannons and men in tight quarters, but it also meant they were frighteningly vulnerable. Mistakes weren't an option. A single trip, a dropped keg, or an exposed flame could mean instant disaster. Despite the danger, many boys served with astonishing bravery, some earning medals or recognition for their courage under fire. By the mid-19th century, advancements in weaponry and ship design made the role obsolete. Steam power, mechanized loading, and better safety systems replaced the need for human powder carriers. Yet the powder monkey endures as a haunting symbol of a harsher era when the thunder of cannons was fueled by the courage of children. In the shadowy corners of 19th century America, resurrectionists, more bluntly, grave robbers, held a job few would admit existed. Their task was as macabre as it sounds: dig up freshly buried bodies and sell them to medical schools and doctors desperate for cadavers. Today, it feels horrifying, but back then, anatomy education was expanding rapidly, and legal access to human remains was nearly impossible. That gap created a dark underground market, and resurrectionists filled it. Working in teams, these men moved under the cover of night, armed with shovels, hooks, and burlap sacks. They pried open coffins, lifted bodies, and loaded them onto wagons waiting nearby. Freshness was crucial. The more recently buried, the higher the price. Poor cemeteries and potter's fields, with shallow graves and minimal oversight, were prime targets. Medical institutions often turned a blind eye, quietly financing these grim operations. Payment per corpse incentivized efficiency, while families caught in the crossfire responded with iron mort safes, night watchmen, or stronger coffins. Newspapers labeled resurrectionists body snatchers, and the work became as dangerous as it was despised. By the late 1800s, new laws allowed medical schools to regulate access to unclaimed bodies, effectively ending the trade. Yet for a brief, eerie period, resurrectionists were essential to advancing modern medicine. Their story sits at the unsettling crossroads of science and morality, a reminder of the extreme lengths humanity once went to, quite literally digging up the past to push knowledge and progress forward. Before computers and digital printing, the Linotype operator was the beating heart of every newspaper, magazine, and publishing house. From the late 1800s through the 1970s, these skilled workers transformed written words into printed pages using massive, complex machines that were equal parts typewriter and foundry. The Linotype machine, invented by Ottmar Mergenthaler in 1884, revolutionized printing by casting entire lines of type in molten lead, giving the machine its name. Linotype operators sat before a keyboard with 90 keys, each representing a letter, number, or punctuation mark. As they typed, brass molds dropped into place, molten lead poured in, and within seconds, a solid slug of text emerged, ready to be arranged into columns for the printing press. Precision and speed were essential. One mistake meant melting down the entire line and starting over. The scent of hot metal, the rhythmic clatter of keys, and the steady hum of machinery became the soundtrack of newsrooms across America. Operators became masters of timing and dexterity, often typing faster than many modern typists, all while handling molten metal inches from their hands. By the 1980s, computerized typesetting rendered Linotype machines obsolete almost overnight. What once required hours of skilled labor could now be completed digitally in minutes. Yet, the Linotype era remains iconic, a time when human craftsmanship literally brought the news to life, line by gleaming line, and when every printed page carried the mark of dedicated expertise. It's wild to think how these strange, risky jobs once powered everyday life. They're gone for good, but they remind us just how inventive and desperate people could be. If you want to see a similar video, check out Things That Were Common in the 1960s but No Longer Exist.